Next session on a much talked about topic, resilient tech backbone, steering technology transitions while managing risks. I am pleased to welcome the panelists for the session and request them to please come to the dais. Shri C.S. Shetty, MD, State Bank of India, Shri Milind Nagnur, Chief Technology Officer, Kotak Mahindra Bank, Shri Ram Gopal Subramani, Chief Strategy Officer, Perfios, Shri Kesari Asthana, CTO, Government Business, Microsoft India, Shri Bikram Singh, Head, Credit Service and Strategic Initiatives, Experian India. And our moderator for this session, Shri V. Vipin, Managing Director and Partner, BCG. May I request Shri V. Vipin to initiate the panel discussion? Over to you, sir.
Hello. Good morning, everyone. A warm welcome to all of you to FIBAC 2023. And thank you so much for taking time out for joining us for this panel discussion. I think we already introduced the panel, so I don't have to do that again. So I hope all of you are aware of our panelists. So let me get straight into the panel discussion itself. As most of us are aware, the rapid advancements in digital has been changing the customer expectations significantly in the market across the board, right? If you look at the digital disruptions which have happened, especially in e-commerce segment, in media segment, etc., has set benchmarks for the rest of the industries to follow. And financial services no different from that, right? A customer who has basically experienced a personalized nudge or a personalized recommendation from an Amazon or a Netflix of the world expects similar kind of experience from all other participants in the industry, including banks, including NBFC, including insurance company, and so on and so forth. Now, Indian banks obviously have been quick to respond to this change. Many banks in India have basically already adopted an omni-channel kind of approach, wherein they have been servicing the customers with a bouquet of online and offline channels. But that has come at a cost. If you look at it, with the rising digital volumes, the amount of stress which is getting created in the tech backbone of all these banks is significant. And there's always a question whether our banks are actually geared up to support these kind of volumes. So for example, many of you might have read, UPI clocked almost 10 billion kind of volumes or 1.1 billion or 10.11 billion kind of volumes last month and is expected to go to almost 2 billion kind of volumes every day, which basically means that the stress on the system, banking system is going to significantly go up. In this context, today's topic for us, which is resilient tech backbone, steering technology transitions while managing risk, becomes a very, very critical topic for discussion. And we have a very esteemed set of panelists today, and we have a good mix of people from banking industry, both public sector as well as private sector. We also have people from Microsoft, who are basically one of the hyperscalers who is supporting some of these transitions. We also have bureau participation as well as fintech participation. So we have a well-rounded panel who can provide us with perspectives on various dimensions. So with this introduction, let me start with Mr. Sethi. Mr. Sethi, I think SBI has been one of the, or in the forefront on many of these digital adoptions, and you are the largest bank in the country. You handle the maximum volumes in terms of any transaction which goes through the country. Considering that context, you also understand that availability and resiliency of tech platforms are very, very critical for us to offer the right kind of customer service or a customer experience. Today, if I look at the banking ecosystem in India, I mean, okay, you can always speak from the SBI perspective, but also from a broader banking perspective, banking ecosystem perspective. Do you believe that Indian banks are geared up for supporting this or managing this customer expectation and competing with some of the late entrants in the market, like the Fintechs and the new age players? And how much of a challenge is the legacy architecture for making that happen?
Thank you, Vipin, for having me on the panel. Thanks to FICCI and IBA for having me as one of the speakers here. Two important things which you have raised. One is about the availability and resilience. I think both of them coexist, go together. And you also pointed out the importance, systemic importance of State Bank of India. We are aware of that, you know. Just to give you an example, on the UPI alone, we do about 165 million transactions a day. And when you are handling that kind of volume, a technical decline, which is currently about 0.5%, actually add up to a significant number of customers not able to transact. Could be for various reasons. So these volumes, number one. Number two, the fact that the significant penetration of the digital channels among the customers. Today, 93 to 94% of our transaction volumes actually happen outside the branch channel. And we have a fairly large branch channel. You are all aware that 22,500 branches are there. But still today, more than 90% of the transactions happen outside the branch channel, which means that the backbone of the banking in general and SBI in particular is technology. So the channel availability has become very critical. We had the option in somebody visiting a branch, you know, if he needs some cash, or if he wants to do a transaction, there were options to engage with him at the branch. But when he is using alternate channels, whether it could be mobile channel or ATM or internet banking, the availability of these channels has become critical. And it is not only from the, of course, the customer is at the center of it, and we need to make the channels available. The regulators are extremely focused on the availability of the delivery channels to the customers. And this becomes important. The resiliency which determines the availability of the channels have to be focused on. Legacy systems have been, I think, of course, the definition of legacy system can be different from one bank to another. The challenge for, old banks, I can say, or the long existing banks is that the IT developments have happened incrementally. Obviously, these are not amenable for the integrations which are expected now. And everybody talks about API banking and reimagining the existing architecture and making it resilient to for such integrations with the ecosystem has become critical. So just from the banking perspective and SBI perspective, what I think, if I have to really talk about the resilience, resilience has 4 or 5 major components. One is, of course, the infra architecture itself. I think a lot of banks have never focused on the enterprise level architecture. When the incremental architectural additions have happened or infrastructure additions have happened, it was never looked at the enterprise level. So for the last almost a decade that we've been having ET&A actively working, and now we have transformed the ET&A into the architectural review committee. Today, no architectural changes, no infra changes can happen in SBI without ARC is actually looking at what would be the future readiness of this architecture which is going to be introduced. The second feature, of course, the DR automation, which is again an important component, and significant investments we made in terms of the data centers and DR, PR, and trying to move to active DR setup is also a part of the resiliency which we are trying to build up. I can go on and on, but I think there are 2, 3 critical pieces which I would like to mention briefly is that how do you manage the integrated SOPs? You know, this is also a resiliency factor which many people don't factor in. And the second feature is large number of recommendations which we receive from the original equipment manufacturers either are not acted upon or ignored, are partly implemented. And then when something goes wrong, OEM says that I've already made the recommendations and you're not. A lot of my OEMs must be sitting in the hall. And we are trying to see that whether we can develop an integrated SOP, number one. Number two, whether we can have a formal system of ensuring that the OEM recommendations are implemented. And third and critical piece is that how do you make your people IT operations is very critical component of the whole resilience piece. And we are trying to reskill them, upskill them, and continuously train them in terms of ensuring that the IT operations are managed properly. And the last piece what we have done is that along with the network operations center and the security operations center, we have introduced what is called resiliency operations center, which is actually helps me to have a one observability across the channels, across the applications, across the network. I think a combination of SOP, SOC, NOC, and ROC is in a direction of ensuring the resilience.
Thank you, Mr. Sethi. I think the 2 points you raised on the operating model as well as the talent part, I have a subsequent question on that, which we'll discuss that in detail. But thank you for raising that point. Let me move to Milind. Milind, I have 2 questions for you. One, while we spoke about that technology architecture is a challenge or a legacy architecture is a challenge, all of us know that over the last 3-4 years, most banks in India have taken up digital transformation programs, and there have been modernization of at least the front-end channels and the front-end applications, right? So where exactly is the challenge? Is it in the middle layer, or is it in the where do we face challenges while we think about supporting the larger digital revolution, right? That's question number 1. The second question I have is, considering the challenges, what do you think is the answer for us going forward? Should we think about, let's say, incrementally making some changes, or should we look at our overall core transformation itself? So what should be the, at least from your perspective, and you have worked for quite some time in the US market as well. So basis your experience from there, what do you think is the right approach for the Indian banks, at least, considering our context?
I think the first layer we have to worry about is the database layer. And in 2003, 2004, I feel the fork in the road happened technologically, where if you look at the architectures at Netflix or Facebook, essentially they went in the distributed database architecture route, where everybody doesn't get impacted if there is some issue with some part of the database or your storage or your disks and so on. Whereas banks have continued to remain on a monolithic architecture more or less. And I think, so the first component to look at now is your database architecture, and look at what are different ways in which you can shard your data and get to a distribution in terms of something going down doesn't impact your entire customer base. It is very important, therefore, to look at your entire payment stack architecture, since we are referring to 10+ billion transactions now happening every month on UPI, and all of them have to synchronously hit the banking core, the core banking platform of some bank or another, or 2 banks in many cases. And this is expected, as you mentioned, to grow 4 times, 6 times in the next 2 or 3 years. So I think it's very important to build resiliency, starting with the database layer, database architecture, then look at your middleware layer, the next layer, where again, we have to plan for failures. And the meaning of resiliency and design, therefore, is how we engineer solutions in a way that if 1 server, 2 servers, even 1 site, 1 container, if that goes down, how do we ensure the continuity of services? So these designs are complex, and I think, therefore, it's required to develop a lot of in-house skills inside the banks in order to go deep, to understand these architectures deeply, not superficially. And India is ahead, as we were talking during the break, in terms of digital infrastructure, starting with the digital identity structures from Aadhaar, then the growth in UPI, the mass digitization when it comes to payments infrastructure, whether it's on the corporate side, consumer side, and now also with CBDC. So India is definitely ahead, and I think if we play the cards right from a technology architecture perspective, I think we have a great opportunity to become a template for the world. And one final thing I'll say is, based on my US experience being a CIO at Wells Fargo, for example, in a prior role, at Kotak Mahindra Bank, with just 2% of the market share, I would say we have more transactions per second on our platform than probably Wells Fargo and Bank of America combined. And therefore, that gives me the confidence to say that if we do it right, if we get it right, we have the opportunity to become a template for digital banking across the world.
Thank you, Milind. I think in one of my previous conferences, somebody mentioned to me that some of the pilots we run in India is bigger than the full scale rollout in many of the countries. That's the kind of scale you see in Indian operations, right? So, Bikram, let me come to you. I think you come from a slightly different background. You're not part of the core bank ecosystem itself, but you're a core enabler for all the banks in India today, right? So, from your vantage point, uh, what do you see is the way forward for Indian banks to basically ready for the next wave of digital revolution? Do you think we should, or the banks should basically look at incremental changes and getting ready over a period of time? Or do you think that we should go for a massive surgery and do a full core transformation? How do you see this going forward?
While I come from a different background, as you mentioned, but if people realize that the bureau holds the data for all banks combined together, and that's massive data that we hold, and basis that massive data that we hold today in the ecosystem. Not only do we look at how our internal systems are, we also need to work very closely with the banks and financial institutions, because a lot of data that we are talking here is all data which is getting transmitted between banks and us. When we now go to the bank side of things, and basis our interaction with the banks, what we realize is that this entire wave of digitization is moving very fast. Banks are way more eager to become digital as much as the consumer wants digital touchpoints. On one side, banks are servicing the masses through AEPS and USSD and all that, which are very basic enablers for financial inclusion. On the other end, you have, financial institutions servicing customers for derivative tradings and all that. And I'm talking consumer side of things. I'm not even talking B2B, which is even more complex at this point of time. So when we look at this entire ecosystem, it's a transition, and this technology transition that everyone is going through, including bureaus, including banks, NBFCs, whatever the case is, it's not something which is a one-time approach, or it's not something which surgical approach can be taken on that. In my opinion, banks have to, if you ask me, look at transitioning from a legacy to a more nimble architecture, because reason is that it is not only about whether they are in the game or not, it is also about the fact that as they transition towards more digital services, and consumers today are not looking at only digital, they are saying, I need personalized digital services. So when that transition comes, it's not only the underlying infra that they have to build, there are layers on top of it that they need to be, very, very nimble. A few things which come to my mind when we talk about this entire transition are, the banks, when they are looking at this transition, should look at things which are microservices and has a modular architecture. They should break their monolithic applications into smaller and independent deployable services. The other thing, when they are doing this kind of entire planning exercise, is that they should have very agile development process, because reason is that as this digitization wave is moving very fast, so does, the acceleration of software development needs to happen. We just mentioned about the API approach. API approach has to be more internal and external for delivery of services. Till I think a few years back, data analytics and AI were spoken more as good to do, but as we speak today, it has become a must to do. Data analytics much more required that you need to harness the power of that analytics to deliver services to the consumer, which is more personalized and also mitigate risk. On the other end, you need a way more focus on AI for insights into consumer risk management and thereof. While all this is happening, one cannot ignore the importance of cybersecurity. So this entire transition, from a legacy to a nimble has to be something which is alongside entire cybersecurity. And when we talk about this entire transition on cybersecurity, the regulator is also as involved today and has a very, very keen eye on what is happening on cybersecurity. Uh, and that's for the right reasons, because consumers' interest has to be protected. Eventually, the banks are working to, not only make money, which is bread and butter, but also safeguard the consumer's interest. Uh, while all this is happening, banks are spending enormous amount of money, energy, time around, the entire tech upgradation, if I might say. But not necessarily everything has to be done in-house. Not necessarily everything has to be done grounds up. Today is the day and age of collaboration and partnerships, and that's something which is very, very important. Uh, Today, there are fintechs available in the industry who can come partner with you and give you very, very smart solutions at a very low cost. They specialize in that. And that's something which, banks, should look at when they are doing all this kind of transition. Lastly, I think change management is important because of the fact that it is not, it's not taken as an isolated case in hand where technology implementation or change is happening. If we might want to look at it, it's a proper cultural shift which is happening in the organization. So, those are the things, which are important when we move from legacy to a more nimble tech, which will be the requirement as we move forward in the digital space in banking.
Thank you. So let me move to Mr. Keshri. Keshri, you come from a background where you are the person, or you're the people who handhold banks in and help them make this transition or make this transformations happen, right? Coming from that background and basis your experience working with numerous banks and other institutions, what do you see as, or what do you think are some of the biggest challenges or risks which the bank leadership should be aware of while embarking on a journey like this, right? That's question number one. The second question is that keeping those risks in mind, would you suggest an approach wherein banks do a hollow the core kind of a concept, wherein they just lean the core, they don't touch the core at this point of time? Or would you recommend going for a replacement of the core itself? So in your experience, what do you think might be a right answer or a good answer for most of the Indian banks in India?
So thanks Vivek for the Vipin for the question. See when any of the organizations or the banks go for transformation, there are three pillars that they change, which is people, process, and technology. And each of these changes come with their own share of risks, right? I'll start with technology first because so from a technology perspective, lots of these organizations, institutions, banks, these have been running technology which are legacy, which have been created over a time of a long period, and they have been created basis the requirements coming in, business requirements as they get modified, and with a very fast speed, right? So there will always be challenges and risks of compatibility. When you bring in new technology, there will be compatibility challenges and integration challenges. So from that, if the previous systems, and standards have also changed, right? The standards, the API, sir was talking about API-based banking. Standards have been changing, so the data exchange mechanisms have changed. New systems are coming with new data mechanism, exchange mechanisms. So integration and compatibility would be the first one. So for example, banks might be running desktops which might not support the clients or the version that the new software requires, right? So that would be the first thing. Second is, as these systems which are running over the period. They have been time tested against security. Multiple security checks have happened over the systems. Now you're going to replace those, right? And that would mean is you may or you have a potential of introducing security vulnerability. And if we don't go through proper change management process, these security vulnerabilities might become a major issue. Right? And we see day in and day out new systems or new transformations actually bringing in different types of security challenges, which the organizations would have never faced earlier or would have never thought about how does that happen. One of the examples was the Intel processor issue that had erupted a few years ago. So the other one where I see is the data loss, right, while doing data migration. People might, when doing the migration, if they don't have a view of the entire data estate while migrating the target system, they might end up losing data, which would be very useful. And you know, when we are talking with lots of customers, we realize that they have built their data warehouses over the period of time and have collected the amount of data which has lots of insight, which they might lose when doing the migrations. So these are very high level, I would say, technology risks that the organization should keep in mind. Or there are many, but these are some of the major ones. When again coming to the, moving to the second part, which is the people part, the risks related with people. You will have to train the people based on the new technology that's coming in. And there will be a significant amount of time, money requirement, and coordination effort required to train the people. At the same time, when you are doing the digital transformation, lots of the systems that have been, that have grown over the years, they would have had lots of vendor dependency. Vendor MSIs, vendor people, vendor OEM technologies, those would be a challenge from a people availability perspective. We see people having, running technology. We have seen organizations running Windows XP, right? We've seen organizations running VB6 applications. So as late as last year, or even probably a quarter ago. So you'll not, it will be really very hard to find people who can support those kinds of, and one of the other things is resistance to change from a people perspective. So that's I would say risks from a people point of view. From a process point of view, there is risks that will have to be mitigated would be regulatory risks, because the new systems and the old systems again have gone through all the regulatory checks, have been going through multiple regulatory audits, reviews. The new systems have to get into these reviews, audits, etc. And second is, of course, the whole aspect of process of DevOps and security operations. If the process of the security operations and the security itself, Sir talked about NOC, SOC, and performance resiliency-based operation centers. These have to be reworked. There will be challenges, there will be changes required in all of these. And there will be risks involved whenever there are challenges. And the last one is, of course, as the cloud comes in, lots of the banks I've seen changing from CapEx to OpEx-based financial operations. And we see CFOs talking with us saying, how do we do this? Earlier, we used to do a budgeting at the start of the year, and now we actually don't know what's going to be the budget. So that's another risk. So from a risk perspective, that's what I would say outline from a people, process, and technology perspective. On your second question, if I have to do a change, right? see the banks are huge. If you see, it's a huge, it's equivalent to a huge manufacturing unit of an IT technology running there. And each and every part is a gear which runs the entire machinery. Anyone going down, anyone having impacted by a change will become a challenge. So from a change perspective, if it will completely depend on the risk appetite of the organization of the banks. If they have, if there is a big bang kind of change that they want to do, right? Changing entire system at one go. While it is a quick and decisive method, right? It's a very, and the impact will be visible immediately. It comes with its own challenges of the process while it's going on cannot be maneuvered easily. It cannot be, it will come with a huge risk of massive downtimes, massive outages, etc. At the same time, on the phased one has a has slow speed, but that also means that it has the room of feedback loop, right? As the changes go on, there will be feedbacks that will be coming in, and the change process can be changed based on the feedback, and it can be maneuvered. But again, since it's a long process, slow cooked food would need large, big coordination effort, and of course the resistance grows. So I think that's what would be these aspects.
Thank you, Kristi. I think absolutely, like you mentioned, I don't think there is no one-size-fits-all answer. It's highly contextual, depending on the risk appetite, the starting point, etc. The answer could be very different for each of the banks in India. But I think I want to catch on one of the points you mentioned on the cloud part, right? So maybe Ram, I will go to you. So Ram, you come from a background where you can say you are pretty much born in cloud, right? You never had a monolithic architecture, or you never had a legacy issue at all. In basis your experience, and you support most of the banking clients, most of the NBFC clients in India in certain capacity. Basis your experience, moving to a more cloud-based architecture and adopting more of cloud, is it or is it an answer for solving many of these problems which the banks are facing today?
Yeah, Vipin. So thanks for having me here. And yeah, we do work with all banks and mostly all NBFCs, right? So I think if you see the journey over we have been cloud native for the last 15 years, right? And if you see our journey when working with banks, NBFCs over the last decade or more, what was started was largely office, if I use the banking term, right? As in, the operations teams were using our products. Credit teams were using it to do the offline processing of bank statements or tax documents and other things, right? They were just logging into the portal. Now, in the last several years, it has become on us. And also, there are two stages of on us. The first part is where it was just integration of the, basically what is now most commonly used as Fintech services across all aspects of the customer engagement. Like Shetty sir talked about, the fact is, bulk of it is now digital, right? I mean, in the part of it, even though there are 22,000 branches and other parts of it, all the way from an account opening, right? Whether there are things about verification of the identity, it is your KYC or the video KYC aspects of it, or it is in the context of a loan underwriting, analysis of document, whether it's through the proprietary forms like a bank statement or touch document, or even through right? So what has now happened is, and I think this is a big part of the shift in the architecture, right? Earlier architectures in bank systems were all siloed, which is all inside their perimeter. Okay. Now today, that silo is kind of broken. You have an extended architecture, which is where the element of even all the processes, the SOPs, right, is an extended SOP. The resilience is an extended resilience because it is not just the infrastructure that you manage, not the systems that you manage. You are now a lot more dependent on your partners or the others on which it comes in. So what we see is, cloud obviously gives you scale, right? Scale on demand. So there are obvious, from that perspective, if there are processing to be done, it is whether a batch processing or it is about you're building out a new product, you want to test out the market. I mean, the quantum of, when all of us talk about UPI, but if I look at the increase in adoption of authentic data over the last 12 months, and the kind of volumes of traffic of requests coming in for your banking analysis, or even the fact that we hopefully now with GST coming in, the kind of data which starts coming in, right? So those kind of scales at an API gateway level, which is joined to the core banking, right? Now that becomes a part of how does a bank involve. So from the, see, it will appear very obvious that cloud is a way to scale, but I don't think it is as simple as that. It is about the nature of the solution that you provide. It's about how much of it is interactive with the customer, how much of it is external, how much of it is internal, right? And it is again, going back to the point which Milan talked about, is from an architecture perspective. How much of your architecture is now kind of microservices segregated, okay? And from that perspective, so some of customer onboarding journeys talk to the systems, but the number of touch points are probably not as many as you think about a underwriting journey, correct? So that comes in. So I think first part is how these systems are designed, and I think there's a tremendous amount of enhancement that's happened over the last 5 years. Today, pretty much, I mean, you have SBI, which is a part of it, right? But if you look at every public sector bank, at least 3 or 4 major product lines have gone through the digital transformation. And the size of the books that is digitally sourced and processed is significant. And it's a journey. So now, from that perspective, nature of product, nature of customer engagement comes into play. But at the same time, also there is risk. And if you look at the fact is, some of these are core systems from that perspective, which means that the data of the customer going out, coming in, okay. So from an information security, those aspects comes in. So what we are seeing now is evolution where there are certain services which is completely just integrated, which means that the provider is completely on the cloud, okay, the fintech services, and then the bank systems are integrating with them. There are certain things like platforms, whether it is your digital lending platform or it's a co-lending part of it. Now these are core, and then they retain the data of the customer. So which is where then you're either going to a shared cloud, okay, or I would say like a co-location but on a cloud where there's a separate part for the provider, which is provided, or in the worst case scenario, depending on, because you're again thinking about this as a store system, so the resilience becomes a big factor, right, and serviceability, observability. So in that case, then it being deployed within the infrastructure. So cloud provides you ability to scale, manage your cost, CapEx, OpEx, but as we were talking earlier, right? But one of the element which is also common is when you have the notion of unlimited resources. I do remember way back in 2000, I mean my earlier avatar, we were building an app for a mobile phone. It was 64 KB. So every line of code that the developer wrote had to be written in a manner to make sure that it is super optimized. Today there is a notion was I can write bad program. There is always infrastructure to solve for it. But bad infrastructure will never solve bad programs or bad designs. Okay. So I think that is the element. So which means that like, Julia Roberts' Runaway Bride movie. So today you have a runaway OpEx, which all of us deal with. And so I think that is where it is. So broadly, it is only infrastructure, right? How do you make your infrastructure, utilize your infrastructure effectively is a part. There are architectural changes, and it is use case based adoption.
Thank you, Ram. I think you made a very important point that cloud is not a silver bullet, right? It's an answer. It solves many of the problems, but doesn't solve all the problems in the world. So I think when any bank or any financial institution is thinking of adopting cloud, it's very, very important for them to have a proper cloud strategy to decide which apps are worth moving to cloud. And if you have to move it, what changes are required from architecture perspective so that the entire benefits can be reaped. And there are certain applications which are not meant for cloud. It has to remain in your on-prem or in your private DC, wherever it is. So that's a good point. With that, let me move to Milind again. Milind, you have seen both Indian bank ecosystem as well as the US banking ecosystem, right? Basis your experience, while there has been a lot of talk on cloud, everybody is going about it, but adoption has been relatively slow at least in Indian banking ecosystem, right? So what do you think are some of the challenges the banks face in today's environment to make it happen? Is it regulatory in nature? Is it talent? Is it governance? What's the challenge according to you?
In cloud adoption?
Yeah.
For cloud adoption. Yeah. I think firstly, one of the core principles is that what is important is to adopt the cloud-like architectures. Because in the architecture review board that we have set up now in our company, we get some vendor products that we evaluate, and we sometimes find that they say that they are running on cloud, but their architecture is absolutely a 3-tier monolithic architecture. So which means that with all the containerization that's available in the cloud, everything still depends on failure of a single database node in their architecture and design. So if you look at these things superficially, and if you had accepted that proposal in your architecture review board and you had gone live with this kind of vendor, you would have gotten absolute zero advantage of being on cloud, right? Whereas if you have built an application even in your own data center with some of the resiliency concepts we spoke about before, I think you will be at a much better level of maturity compared, even though you're on your data center. So I think more important to me is understanding the cloud native designs and architectures and adopting them either in your data center or on cloud. For example, cloud has the AWS, for example, has the concept of multiple availability zones. So what it means is if one availability zone is down, the other one picks it up. This has a resiliency aspect, but this also allows you to experiment. For example, you can do A/B testing with your mobile application on 2 different availability zones. You can do blue-green deployments, meaning a lot of banks and a lot of applications are behind on patching. And one of the things that a cloud-like architecture gives you, and you can have multiple availability zones in your data center design as well. So therefore, you can patch while you're running on AZ1, you can patch AZ2 and then switch and then come back and so on. So I think more important, therefore, to me is to understand and learn from cloud native design and architecture and implement it either in your data center or on cloud. And in general, the theme, regulation-wise, that what we are experiencing is the core product processors still remain within the data centers, and some of the engagement layers where you have to be very elastic, and some of the digital onboarding journeys, those can be easily adopted and developed on public cloud infrastructure with the right level of security and controls. But speaking back and committing data ultimately to core product processors that reside in your data center, that's roughly how the bifurcation is evolving.
Thank you, Milind. Mr. Sethi, let me come to you. I think when we spoke previously, one of the points you raised was one of the biggest challenges today is most of the banks, while we are trying to move to cloud, we don't have a good governance structure or operating model which is already defined, which will make sure that whatever we're doing on the cloud front will be successful, right? Can you just add a little bit more flavor so that our audience can also appreciate the concerns you had raised?
I think when we talk about cloud, obviously we're talking about public cloud. The cloud adoption strategy is a kind of an important element in the IT strategy of any bank today. Just to give you a perspective, IBA has been running a program called Enhanced Access and Service Excellence, the EASE program. And the 6th version of the EASE program is digital heavy. And one of the items we have decided is that how do we help the public sector banks to move towards cloud adoption? And the primary starting point is the governance structure. And I think Ram has mentioned and Milind has also mentioned in terms of the cloud is not a panacea. We all know that it's not going to solve every problem. And we need to approach cloud adoption with caution for 2 reasons. One is, of course, the concerns on the data privacy, data security, and the regulatory requirement of the liability on the REs than the cloud service providers. And more importantly, we also have noticed that large number of applications are not cloud native. If you see the evolution of adoption of technology in many banks, even as late as 5 years back or 6 years back, yes, we always asked any solution provider, are you going to deploy on-prem? Otherwise, don't deal with me. But we moved from on-prem to private cloud. Today, we have the largest, probably, private cloud in the country with 18,000 VMs, right? One of the largest private cloud, Meghdut. And we moved from on-prem to Meghdut. Most of the solutions, most of the applications currently developed are deployed in Meghdut. Now the public cloud adoption would need to be evaluated from the fact that how many of your applications can actually move to public cloud. And there are not many, let me tell you. Most of the banks will find that 10 to 12% is the maximum what they can readily move to public cloud. The strategy would be, as you said, first is the governance. You know, what applications can move, number one. Number two, and the cloud is also not cheap. I think we also have realized that it's, in fact, I used to send a cartoon to everyone. There were two people sitting in the park on a bench. One guy is saying that, you know, how did you lose all your money? He says that I lost my money in the share market. The other guy says, how did you lose your money? I said, I forgot to switch off the instance of the public cloud. So he continued to pay that money. So it is not cheap. We all know that it's not cheap. So we need to have the cost-benefit analysis of moving any application to the cloud. That's very important. And the governance starts from there. The second thing is that to evaluate your applications and also look at the cost-benefit, whether you have right teams with a clearly defined roles and responsibilities. This is where I said about the governance structure is very important. But as far as IT strategy and the cloud adoption, what we have decided as a cloud adoption framework is that any application, which is a significant shift from my question, which I used to ask the developers, that is whether your application can be deployed in on-prem. Now I'm asking them that whether you can develop an application which I can deploy on my Meghdut, but subsequently I can move to public cloud, which means that cloud ready or cloud native applications have to be developed. One of the largest channel transformation which we are undertaking, 2.0, is essentially being made in form of cloud native architecture. The moot point which I'm trying to make is that cloud adoption, public cloud adoption would eventually happen, but I definitely take what Milind said, that you would be surprised that the adoption will be slower. And but adoption will definitely happen. We realize that a lot of internal applications can move. More importantly, the scalable applications, particularly UPI, is the biggest use case which can move to public cloud. We need to find out how we work out the safety and security aspect and the PII data and all these things happen.
Currently, we're running a program with an IM Caltra. Okay. For a lot of people, it's a year-long investment, right? So those are things that you have to, like we talked about governance strategy, I think talent governance is a major aspect, and that's something that we have focused a lot on. And kind of, I would say, our average retention, right, of a campus is 4 years. Okay. We're obviously just a 1,500 people company, not very big, but and we've grown I would say we have doubled in the last 4 years. So in the last 4 years, which is basically around 700 people added in the last 4 years, right? And I will look at the 700 people who were there before that. We probably have 400 or 500 of them still there. So which is this thing. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Ram. I think we are almost on time. I think two quick questions, one to Keshri and one to Bikram. Keshri, considering that you are the supplier of many of these technologies, how are you supporting, or what kind of programs do you have to support the banks in facing or overcoming some of these challenges, especially on governance side, talent side, etc.? Do you have a structured way of solving this or supporting the bank clients with this?
Yeah, Vipin, you have asked me a question which I can go on and on, although you have given me less time. But yeah, so see, from a perspective of governance and talent, right? there are two important things that we have been trying to do. One, from a governance, and when the banks come to the cloud, right? Something that they talk about is data privacy and security. Shetty sir was mentioning that. So we've ensured that our data centers, our cloud, are all certified with the requirements that financial industries across the globe are asking for. And we also bring in kind of reference architectures which have all the securities inbuilt, helping them to bring in the right security operations, right security practices, and security controls there. At the same time, we also give IP protection, complete IP protection, so that if they are building IPs, they have comprehensive IP protection and they don't have any issues with the competition. From a talent perspective, what we have, we have recently launched co-pilots for GitHub, where it has now become a developer friend in their environment. We recently did a huge migration of old legacy code platform from a Java-based 1.4 Java to the latest Java using Copilot. And of course, there were testing involved, but the success rate was quite high. So Copilot, and as well as low code and no code, is also ensuring that the business and tech coming together, the business people becoming more capable of really developing the tech themselves. So low code, no code, and security and GitHub Copilot kind of stuff is what we are helping to bridge the gap, close out the challenges that they are facing on legacy, they are facing on security and those aspects.
Thank you. Bikram, last question to you. One topic which we discussed multiple times during the conversation today is on cybersecurity, right? And you own or you hold most of the customer credit-related data as being a bureau, right? So, from your perspective, how ready are we in terms of, if I take you as well as the banks, how ready are we from to basically prevent ourselves against any cybersecurity threats, etc.? And what do we need to do going forward to ensure that we are well covered?
Yeah, so when it comes to cybersecurity, the way I look at it is that cybersecurity is a journey. It's not a destination in itself. And the way today Indian organizations, be it banks or be it bureaus like us, or anyone who's got access to data, is looking at cybersecurity. I personally believe that we are in a state where we are geared up to anticipate and prevent cyber attacks. But that does not mean, there is anything foolproof. There are always bad actors who will find, ways and means of getting into it and launching a cyber attack. But there are reasons why I say that we are well geared up for that. Be it from a regulator's perspective, regulator has, called out a proper cybersecurity framework, which includes governance, risk management, oversight by the board of directors, in the entire framework. Banks have their own guidelines, or be it bureau as an example, when we are there, we've got our own guidelines around information security, network security, access control, coding practices, and so on and so forth. Every organization, which is regulated in the country today, follows a proper incident reporting matrix process. There is cyber crisis management plan which is in place with all the organizations today. Things like, we've spoken extensively about cloud, by the way. So on cloud security, there is, secure configuration of cloud environment, data encryption, access control, which is put in place by every organization, and even the service providers, be it AWS or Azure, they are the ones who are helping a lot of this transition in the organizations. Organizations are increasingly moving to new technologies like blockchain, because the belief is that, such kind of technologies will also ensure that there are least amount of infringements when it comes to cybersecurity. So overall, I think we are in a good state. There's a lot of regulatory oversight which is coming in. Luckily, we have a regulator who's not only looking at oversight, but understands technology and is investing personally also into that technology at their end in terms of bringing their own people up the curve and bringing in industry best practices.
Thank you. So I think let me summarize then. I think it was a good conversation. I think what I feel is everybody agrees that the Indian banking ecosystem needs to go through a transformation to be ready or to support the larger volumes of digital traffic we're expecting in the coming years. But I think also everybody agrees that it needs to be done in a prudent manner while keeping in mind the risks and setting up the right guardrails in terms of governance, in terms of cybersecurity, in terms of managing the cost, etc., etc. So I think it is a good conversation. I want to thank the entire panelists for taking time out and sharing your perspective today. And once again, thank you to the entire audience for listening through and being supportive. Thank you so much.
Thank you, all dignitaries. Indeed, this was such an enlightening session. I am sure all have gained insight into the topic. Dear all, we will take 5 minutes to change the dais for the next session. May I request everyone to please be seated